got this. Okay, here we go. How do I make this a little larger like this? No, there we go. All right, good evening, folks. I've invited a couple of people to come and hang out with me for the evening. Problem with that is nobody's actually showed up just yet. That's okay. See what's going on here. All right. I'm going to try the invite thing again. Come over here to, and how do I share this? Come over here and I share screen and screen. Where's this one? All right, share screen. There we go. Okay, here we go. And I want to do this. Share screen. All right. StreamYard. Okay, there we are. Let's try this one. And then this one. That's a lot better. There we go. And then we already did that. Come over here. Okay. I guess you just click on it. So this is going to be my first live stream cast on kind of my own. Hey, you should have been streaming when you had a minute where somebody made you laugh for no apparent reason. Good to have you here. Thanks for coming through. It's probably, let's see, about 1 o'clock in the morning in Flint, Michigan, in Beecher territory. Just click on it, I guess. There we go. We'll wait and see if he gets that. Come over here. Invite. Got a clipboard. Wait, I don't need all that. Get rid of this then. And then I have channel dashboard and my subscribers. I need to find my subscribers so I can get a hold of this lady. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, here we go. 5. Oh, there she is. Here we go. All right, so I need to invite. How do I invite this person? Baby, any idea how I invite somebody? Never mind. How would I?
Little thingy?
What little thingy?
Well, the StreamYard, I think he said.
Yeah.
And
Invite.
then,
Okay. I see what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and post something on here for her to see this. Unless it's already alerting her and she already got the alert that I'm on. I don't know. All right, so there's that. And I come back over here and get rid of this. And then
send that
I
to
want to do, how do I make that small?
I don't know.
Okay, so I want to make that small.
Oh.
Right here.
Let me see.
Wait, I'm down here. Here
Let
we
me
go.
see.
So I want to hang on to that one. The what? Oh, what did I just do here? There, I'm good, right?
Do where it shares the screen. You gotta take and do that in the computer one.
Over here on this one?
No. Right there. And hit the 2. The last one. Down. Over. Over 1. Because he's going to be on here with you, right?
I'm thinking, yeah.
So, now remember what he taught you.
Okay.
Where
Alright.
it shows the screen too.
Okay, so that would be share screen. Right here.
Okay.
What's that, baby?
I'm taking this in there too.
Okay.
Putting it on the bed.
What's that? Well, I was going to burn this with you first.
I was going to get in time.
Well, okay, I guess you can wait. Alrighty, so like I said, I'm figuring this out. A lot of subjects we want to touch on, and one of those things was it has to do with politics. That's just kind of how it works out sometimes. Then there's life and the world, and then religion and politics mixing up and not mixing up, and then things we've been taught over the years that were a bunch of crap, and then things we learned over the years that we thought was a bunch of crap. What?
Are you even recording?
I believe I am live streaming right now. All right, so it says end broadcast, and I'm like, no, wait, end broadcast yet. Okay, so this thing is wonky. There we go. All right, here I am up top. Good, good, good. That's what I wanted to see. There, right there. So I'm gonna go over this right quick. 9.
He will not make the LSU football team.
He says 9, I think. Okay, so we're talking directly to this board. They're talking about Q, talking to the people who are involved with Q and watching Q and paying attention to Q. All right, so this is a video that's already on YouTube as it is. You can search it out for yourself. But Alice Pleasance Hargreaves, or Little. Let's go back just a smidge. All right. Inspiration for the main character of the book, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. The thing about that is, there's another book they're going to mention later on called Young Baron Trump's Adventures, from like 17 or 1800 something. That supposedly that was based off of Alice in Wonderland, and it was written. Well, she was born in 1852 and died in November of 1934. She was probably hit 60, 70 years old. But she was the inspiration for Alice's adventures. So that tells you a little bit about what kind of person or kid she was. And she had wonderful experiences and adventures and whatnot. Problem with that is young Baron Trump, all of the stuff and adventures he went through in his little book there. A lot of it's coming to pass even now, and who knew 40, 50, 60 years ago there was even a book with that title that encompasses a lot of what's actually happening in the past 25 to 30 years. And there's a lot of different topics and subject in that book alone that you could touch on that, my goodness. So anyways, but it's supposedly based off of that, Alice's Wonderland. Problem with that is Alice in Wonderland was written after the Baron Trump book.
He's got the little bit of 10-inch neck.
You're talking about somebody. Problem
What
is,
size shirts do you need on him? I wear a size 9. 9. He will not make the LSU football team that I can turn. And the neck is gone.
Alright, so I'm trying to share this video. So what we're going to do is we're going to pause this. See the eye right here? Everything's a mirror image. Everything. So we're going to call this guy and see what happens. I'm going to turn down the volume. How do I turn down the volume on this? I guess I don't. Huh. He no answer. Okay, he not answering. So, come over here. Oh, that's because he's not exactly online. All right, they're up, they're awake. Robert Page. Let's see who's up. All right. None of these people will want to talk about those things. So, we'll go over here to this one here. Put this one down. And we'll try to give her a call. I know it's late. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Oh, well. Okay, done. Here we go. I'm going to contact Harley. That's one of my nieces. I was trying to contact one of my nephews a second ago. And they told me earlier today that they would be willing and down to go ahead and do a video chat with me. So, oh, see what happens. Oh, it was still nothing. All right. So, back to this. Yeah, looking glass.
The looking glass shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities. The cube would react with the people present. So there was an alteration, if you will, over what you were seeing.
I'll explain the cube just a little bit, all right? Going forward, in order to look back, the cube. If you're a Star Trek fan at all, you know a little bit about something they can call the cube, all right? Now, here's the thing. Area S4, level 42, 42. They talk about that a little bit if you're paying attention. All right. But like I was saying there a second ago, there's that. America will be okay. Future proves the past. Now, this right here, there's a base that has this facility, this type of contraption in it, that is a base jump-off type deal for time travel from one location to another, if it be from a place, a time, or an event of some nature that requires some kind of research as to who all was there. It's really a matter of control, power, and whatnot from those in control and in power, or at least they believe they are. I believe that the American public, which we are the public, as Ron White used to say it, public. I like the way he said that. It was fun. But when we get off our asses and realize that we need to take shit over, and it's in our Constitution, we're allowed to. When your government becomes so unruly that it needs a whooping like a 4-year-old child, and then put in a corner in a timeout and maybe go to bed without supper, and then work in the morning at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning until about 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. Then you'll have breakfast, maybe at 8. Make sure the child eats well, get back out there and do some more work until about 7, 8 o'clock at night, maybe 9. And I'm talking work, folks, because you're back out the door by 11. I mean, you're just having breakfast between 8 and 9:30, and you're back out the door by 11:30 or noon and working until 8, 9 o'clock at night. Now that's work. And you've already been working since 5 a.m. doing whatever it is you need to do. Farmers, they know the drill. People who have to run the daily grind in the city and take the subway and tram and all those things, they understand that kind of a drill. But when it comes to the differences in the styles of work, now, a lot of farming has a lot to do with not just brawn, but a lot of brain as well. And nobody seems to understand that. Y'all think farmers are just backwoods rednecks. Nah, not all of them. And most of them that are smarter than you would ever think. And those folks that are in the city running these corporations, they're getting by on other people's efforts. I promise you that. A good definition and example of that would be a movie called The Wolf of Wall Street. So back to this right quick.
The Stargates also have field.
Yes, he's a
The looking glass
Stargate.
shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities. The cube would react with the people present. So there was an alteration, if you will, over what you were seeing from it. They are decommissioned. They are separated into their three components. There's a projection component, a ring component, and also a barrel component to the both the Stargate devices as well as the looking glass device. The Stargates also have field posts, and again, I'm not a physicist, so I wouldn't be the appropriate one to make comment as to how they work. There were field posts that were positioned around the actual gates, and they have been stored, I guess. I'm not certain what happened to the field components, but of the three components, they've actually been decommissioned, and liaisons to the European Union, the United Nations, and NATO are actually in. Require a second looking glass to be turned on at the same time to get acoustics or sound, if you will, from whatever the people were watching, but to go to piggyback in tandem with the visual response of the equipment. That it required two to be turned on to hear anything.
Okay, and we're back again.
The looking glass shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities.
Okay, well, okay.
The cube
I'm still
would
going.
react
Good.
with the people present. So there was an alteration, if you will, over what you were seeing from it. They are decommissioned. They are separated into their three components. There's a projection component, a ring component, and also a barrel component to the both the Stargate devices as well as the looking glass device. The Stargates also have field posts, and again, I'm not a physicist, so I wouldn't be the appropriate one to make comment as to how they work. But there were field posts that were positioned around the actual gates, and they have been stored, I guess. I'm not certain what happened to the field components, but of the three components, they've actually been decommissioned, and liaisons to the European Union, the United Nations, and NATO are actually in possession of them. And there is no one group which has one of the other two components. It draws off from a natural ERB, an Einstein-Rosen bridge. It accesses it and somehow works, from what I understand, not in parallel, but almost like piggybacks on the energy of the natural Stargate. They were usually worked in tandem. It required a second looking glass to be turned on at the same time to get acoustics or sound, if you will, from whatever the people were watching, or to go to piggyback in tandem with the visual response of the equipment. That it required two to be turned on to hear anything. The original device was the Stargate device. That was then increased in power, if you will, with the use of these field posts to stabilize the doorway, if you will, to step through into another location, which in essence is distance and time are relative. The same thing, step two into another time. The looking glass device was a back-engineered Stargate.
Okay, so we're going to go way back here. And try and get some people to watch this video with us.
And a shifty shift. Little shifty shift.
There we go.
It's got the little 10-inch neck. What size shirts do you need, Adam? I wear a size 9. 9. He will not make the LSU football team, that I can tell you. And the neck is gone.
All right, hopefully some of these people check me out, because I don't know how late they are. They stay up or whatever, but there's a bunch of my people. Okay. All right. And then I want to make a comment, but I can't make a comment on her.
The looking glass shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities.
Okay, so I come back over
The
here.
cube would react with the people present. So there was an alteration, if you will, over what you were seeing from it. They are decommissioned.
Okay.
They are separated into their three components. There's a projection component, a ring component, and also a barrel component to both the Stargate devices as well as the looking glass device. The Stargates also have field posts, and again, I'm not a physicist, so I wouldn't
All right,
be the
so
appropriate one to make a comment
video
as
on
to how it
video. I
works.
still like
There were
this one.
field
This one's
posts that
kind of
were
cool.
positioned around the actual
So,
gates.
You
And
guys are learning with me.
they have been
I'm
stored,
learning,
I
so
guess.
bear
I'm
with
not
me.
certain what happens
Please
to the
bear
field
with me.
components, but of the
Let's
three
see.
components have actually been decommissioned and liaisons to the European Union,
Tracy,
the United Nations, and NATO are actually in possession of them. And there is no one group which has one of the other two components. It draws off from a natural ERB, an Einstein-Rosen bridge. It accesses it and somehow works, from what I understand, not in parallel, but almost like
Let's try this.
on the energy of the natural Stargate. They were usually worked in tandem. It required
There
a
you
second
go.
looking glass to be turned on at the same
All
time
right, so
to
let's see
get
what happens
acoustics
now.
or sound, if you will, from whatever
Let's see.
the people were watching, or to go to piggyback in
And
tandem with the
else?
visual response of the equipment. That it required two to be turned on to hear anything. The original device was the Stargate device. That was then increased in power, if you will, with the use of these field posts to stabilize the doorway, if you will, to step through into another location. Which, in essence, is to stabilize the same thing, step two into another time. The looking glass device was a back-engineered Stargate. So it was actually back-engineered from the original cylinder seal data, which allowed us to produce the Stargate access devices, if you will, what we call the Stargates.
I need to
It's a back-engineered device.
turn on
So the
the.
looking glass is a secondary device, and it was coming into its
Nope.
for
Like
in
that.
the
I don't
60s
like
and
that at all.
70s. That's when they started
Um,
actually being
I'm gonna turn on the
being,
chat.
showing a lot of
Over here.
interest in actually building the equipment to be able to see over the curvature of time space so that they can see into the future and somewhat into the past, but basically the future. The looking glass shows probabilities, or has shown probabilities.
Yes.
The tube would react with the people
Live viewer
present.
comment show. Okay.
So
There we
there was
go.
an alteration, if you will, over what you were
There.
seeing from it. It would actually spin out as a yellow disc down the top of it, where the word yellow originally came from. And depending upon what predisposition, it's kind of like little Yoda telling young Luke, you bring in there what you have with you, whatever is in there is what you bring. You could then change the perspective, the tilt, the orientation or angle of the information being presented back to you.
There we go.
So unless you are well prepared to deal with such a thing, human interaction and human emotions bring instability of problems of the information, of the situations involving the treaties, their outcomes, the actual potential for both timeline number 1 and timeline number 2 outcomes. In the case that we're in right now, we seem to be in a variant of timeline 1, and that's good. For everything that I've seen and have read and reported to me concerning timeline number 1, it's not happening exactly the way that they figured that it would. But then again, it couldn't, because we've made changes along the way, which diverted us away from timeline number 2. And in so doing, our future, again, I regard our future as something which is pretty much a blank slate. We're writing it for ourselves. And so we are now seeing something coming to pass which is slightly different than the prognostication.
All right. And I still don't have anybody coming through for me.
Since actually
this is weird.
By the publications, by the leaders of the various countries,
Not used to that, man.
skew the history
Used to people like
of the human race. And the common folk,
let's see. I
the
did
average
the
people,
invites.
all of us, have a right to a future which is our own. And not being skewed and designated and promulgated and promoted and provoked by blue bloods who feel that they are above everyone else. The cube was actually, the information about the cube's existence was known as of 1946. It was further discussed in 1947 after a certain crash in Midwestern, lower southwestern state, New Mexico. And following which, during the first brokering for treaties by the Orions with Eisenhower, the cube was handed to Eisenhower. It was in fact expected to go to the United Nations authorities, and it was in fact spirited away by the United States military.
And a looking glass is not the same as a Stargate.
Right.
No, a looking glass is a back-engineered form of
Hey,
the
there's
original
one.
cylinder
There's somebody.
seal descriptions of how to build the units that they made Stargate. So in essence, you can take a looking glass unit and make a couple changes to the equipment, lift it up on an angle, put field posts around it, and open up a hole to step through.
Sure. Okay, but the looking glass can show you the future. So are we saying
future probabilities, not the future?
This is Dan Burns. Now, what we just watched is from a 2-hour interview that he did with Project Camelot back in 2007 about the looking glass technology. Now, with accounts like this, I always try to remind myself of one thing. All major advances in technology at one time seemed like laughable fantasy. The thought of electricity in a light bulb lighting up instantly would have seemed like heretical magic not even 200 years ago. The idea of traveling through the sky at 10 times the speed of a horse, or in the case of the Concorde, 25 times, would have probably got you locked up in the Middle Ages and so on. So while some of these stories, these whistleblowers telling these depositions can get a bit wild, in my opinion anyway, I don't let them distract me from the core information. So what I did here is I went through this interview and I isolated all the direct info about this tech, because no matter where these people's stories go, it does seem to me like they're all referencing the same technology, or at least variations of it. Now I'll play the rest of this, Then I'll show you another account of what I believe.
You know,
to
I'm
be the
betting I
same
have them
technology.
here that I just don't
Finish
know
with
it.
my own breakdown of whether or not I even believe time travel is
All
feasible,
right, let's see
and
what
then my
happens.
overall thoughts.
The position of the rings, the orientation, the energy running through them,
Okay, how
the
do I
barrel,
know?
etc. Because you can raise the barrel up on armature inside the center of it. All come into play as if you have an
I
onion,
need all
the
that.
various layers of the onion. As you move through the different energy levels, you also move through the different layers, so you get different bits of information. Now imagine an almost infinite number of layers overlaid in comparison to the positions of the rings, and an almost infinite amount of energy that you can add and subtract,
This.
tuning it up, tuning it down.
Well, it sounds
Instead of going up by 1 hertz or by 2 hertz, maybe by a thousandth of a hertz
How
up
do
and
I
down.
get people
Technology is not being used at all right now.
okay, but the reason it's not used now is because of where we're going into the
Yeah,
galactic,
Devin's gone off.
the plane of the.
As of about 2017, I would expect probably that all of these little pieces of equipment
Yeah,
will
this stuff
probably
is
all be
crazy
assembled.
here.
Turned back on.
Oh, sure.
2017. That's quite a while.
2016, 2017.
So not until then.
Looking for
Probably
pieces
not.
of this, that, and the other
So-called-
thing. Looking for pieces of this, that, and the other thing, and they're gathering each of these pieces to bring them all together in specific areas. Each piece has its own part to play in different sections, in different parts of the world, different countries, different states, different little towns, different villages, even out in the middle of nowhere where it's still just tribes. And there's a purpose for all that, because once you triangulate everything, there's a power source that not only can and may destroy what we know as the planet and the people that live on it, and all the bugs and all the birds and all the fish and all the animals, just like the extinction of the dinosaurs, which that's another thing up for speculation. So either way, yeah, it's one of those things where no matter what happens in the world, some things are just so amazing they blow your mind within a matter of 30 seconds, and you think to yourself, and you unintentionally speak out loud while you're thinking, dang it, I should have been streaming.
Cycle of catastrophe or season of catastrophe of Falconelli, the time period from
Some serious info.
right around 1992 to right around 2012,
Oh,
right around that area. While we will have passed 2012, we really ought to get through the entire cycle, which is about 1980 to about 2016, to feel confident that the interpretation from the timeline from the future about their own catastrophe is not off by a few
And I
years.
need to go.
We're talking about 45,000 years or 52,000 years respectively. We have difficulty understanding what happened in 2000
See
years.
what's going on with my video.
And we're talking about 50,000
That's
years
YouTube
here.
right there. Oh,
So
that's streamer.
it's very wise for them to wait.
The looking glasses are now decommissioned, but also the Stargate
Yeah,
technology.
yeah, they're decommissioned, and the Stargates and the
All
looking
right.
glasses, I'm sure they're all in their little mothball containers and all of that. And they have been separated, the three components of each
One's
have been
watching.
separated.
I'm watching my own
into
live
different
stream.
power
This is
structures,
great.
diplomatic and military authorities on the world.
I'm the only person watching my live stream at 1:30 in the
UN
morning.
and NATO. Those are our
This is awesome.
specific
So I'm gonna come over
Control.
here.
of one of the three components each.
Okay, so basically what I gathered from this is that there's a floor in one of the facilities in Area 51 called Alice's Floor, and that it has a stuffed white rabbit permanently mounted above the entrance to the Project Looking Glass room. On the floor in Area 51 is a jump room, which utilizes an Einstein-Rosen bridge, a Stargate, and a looking glass device. He also spoke of a yellow cube which was given to us by the Orions, which seems to work also like the looking glass, that it shows future probable timelines. This floor is the second level of Building 4, or Level 4-2, which I find particularly interesting because famously, in the 1979 novel A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, at the end, spoiler alert, the answer to life, universe, and everything around this day is B42. Obviously, it's a joke, nonsensical, simplistic answer to the most complex question in the history of time. But yet, here's supposedly
Okay,
a
so
floor in
let's see
Area
who's all
51
on.
that has figured out how to allow people to traverse time as they would the other three
There.
dimensions. The floor is 4-2. 42. So
Now we'll
maybe
see
a
what
little
happens.
Easter egg there by Mr. Douglas Adams, depending on how in the know he
Let's
was.
see what
But
happens.
what I can tell from listening to many testimonies from different
So
people
we'll
is that
come back
the
over here to
descriptions of the
this.
devices and how they work all
We're
seem to be
half an
pretty
hour
steady.
into this.
So it does in fact seem like they exist.
We're
Now, Dan
half
states
an
that the
hour
main
into
three
this.
components of these were all split up to keep whoever received
30
the
minutes.
check. But what if those weren't the only devices? And what if someone else had cracked the code? He claims that the Looking Glass was
My
reverse
friends.
engineered from the
They cracked the code. I wonder if somebody had cracked. There's that cube again. There's that cube again. But my friends in the aisle have cracked the code. We got our dollars on the train to the party.
or level 4-2, which I find particularly interesting because famously in the 1979 novel A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, at the end, spoiler alert, the answer to life, universe, and everything around is stated to be 42.
42.
Obviously, it's a joke, nonsensical, simplistic answer to the most complex question in the history of time.
My
But yet,
friends in
here's
the aisle have
supposedly
cracked the
a floor in
code.
Area 51 that has figured out how to allow people to traverse time as they would the other.
Okay, so check this out, though. Here's the thing about this, is the fact that, no, I want to bring it back over here. And then bring it way up over here. So you've got this right here. The Einstein Bowden, whatever. It's like a small black hole, wormhole, whatever. And Sasha's still outside. I'll be back in just a minute. Okay. Had to get my girl inside from outside. She's been outside for a minute. So we got this stuff here. You can jump from one spot to another, no matter what the time, no matter what the place, no matter what direction. A lot of it's based on ancient, not just biblical writings or scholars, but ancient shit. So just listen to the guy.
Dimensions. The floor is 4-2, 42. So maybe a little Easter egg there by Mr. Douglas Adams, depending on how in the know he was. But what I can tell from listening to many testimonies from different people is that the descriptions of the devices and how they work all seem to be pretty steady. So it does in fact seem like they exist. Now, Dan states that the main three components of these were all split up to keep whoever received them in check.
All right. I ain't seen nobody show up
Those
yet.
weren't the only devices. Now, what if someone else had cracked the code? He claims that the Looking Glass was reverse engineered from the Sumerian cylinder seals and that they were first introduced to this tech after recovering it from a downed UFO in the 40s. That might not be the entire story. In 2004, Washington lawyer Andrew Bashago had come out and claimed that from 68 to 72, he was involved in a dog
How do I
project
share
that
when
was
I'm watching?
which they had developed from going over Nikola Tesla's schematics after he had died. And he stated that this tech was being used to move between different periods of time, and that from the ages 7 to 12, he was part of an operation named Project Pegasus. Now, this is especially interesting to me because it was Donald Trump's uncle, John Trump, who was brought in to go over Tesla's work after he had passed in 43. Trump's uncle John was an American electrical engineer, an inventor, a physicist, and a professor at MIT. So this is one of the rare people who actually knew what he was looking at when going over these notes. Now, it's also worth noting that John Trump and Julian Assange look nearly identical. Make what you want of that. But
There we go.
back to Bashago. Here's what he has to say.
The use of that device as a teleportation device was accidentally discovered when they constructed a model of one of the drawings that was in Nikola Tesla's papers upon his death.
Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla's uncle. I'm sorry, Nikola Tesla. When they took and raided his place There was some kind of massive fire. No. He had the free energy electromagnetic fields that weren't exactly just energy. But he'll talk about it in a minute, that time warping is an exact science. It does happen. It does exist. And people time slip all the time. It's just a matter of catching them in that moment and understanding that they know what they know and they are who they are. And me personally, I ain't messing with none of that. Got nothing to do with me. I ain't even trying to play. No siree. And how do we do that to where? Bring this down just a little bit, and then bring. This thing is touchy. Bring him in just a little bit. Bring him out just a little bit so I can see the thing video that we're doing. Okay. Move him over here. Move him over here. Okay, there we are. I can see you too. Now the thing is, he's talking about when they raided the place, they took all Tesla's paperwork, everything he had written down, all the documentation, everything he had ever tried to invent, anything he might have discovered, any resolutions, solutions, or culminations of honest answers to any subject or problem that he may have run across or found. All the government seized every last bit of the paperwork. But in the process, what they did was they gave it to a guy named John, who just happened to be the uncle to a guy who became a president. Here we go.
And it just said Tesla energetic array, or energetic array in his original documents. And they didn't know at first that it was a teleportation device, a teleporter. They set it up there. And
teleportation.
Right.
Uh-oh.
And what I was told is that a technician walked through the energy field to retrieve a screwdriver on a workbench in the lab. And he suddenly disappeared. So that his supervisor thought he had been disintegrated by this Tesla device. 6 weeks or 6 months later, he shows up at the door of the facility, that very lab. And his supervisor
And this
collapses.
one here, we're a little bit behind schedule.
Literally collapses, believing he's come back from the dead, or grateful he didn't die in the development of his Tesla device, the construction of his Tesla device. And then he tells me the full detail of how he fell through a tunnel, apparently in the time-space continuum, and popped out in Africa.
This is crazy.
Where he was virtually deified by the local tribe that he was teleported to, until he explained that, no, I'm just an ordinary human being, trying to communicate to them that the way in which they would take him to the national government, he would be able to get home. And he did. It was either 6 weeks or 6 months. I think it was 6 weeks. But that's, in fact, the story we were told in our training. So they realized that this Tesla device, in Tesla's original papers, that had actually been seized by the War Department, kept in the National Archives under the Alien Property Act in 1944, and then forwarded to Los Alamos when the Manhattan Project physicists began gathering there to build the atomic bomb. They thought, well, let's send Tesla's paperwork to the physicists in the world.
Ain't that something?
So
I'm looking at myself on delay.
Los
This
Alamos,
is just
when
crazy.
Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory was started to build the atomic bomb, and that's where they remain to this day. Project Pegasus, quote unquote, owed its greatest debt of gratitude to Nikola Tesla. We did use some reverse engineering from down to extraterrestrial craft. We were given some technology by the ET groups that we were in liaison with during these years, but there's no question that time travel is the accomplishment of our species in this planetary context. It wasn't all reverse engineered. In the front of the room were 2 gray parenthesis-shaped objects that look sort of just like little fingers, sort of like closing parentheses. They were built into their bases, kind of like high-end stereo speakers, and they were about 8 feet high and about 10 feet apart on the floor of the lab there. And on the left boom, there was a technician sitting at a video console with a keyboard. And on the right side, the boom was plugged into the power outlet on the wall. That was about the size of the power you would need to power a small sized industrial piece of equipment, like an industrial lathe or press. And my dad had the technician turn on
Alright,
the
so
device.
that's that.
What I saw was essentially energy that was radiating between the two booms of the device, like water falling on public sculpture. And then my dad had me go up towards the device, and it looked like raster on a TV set. And there were little squiggles at 3-inch intervals coming out of portals of light, sort of light green portals of light. So there were these bluish green squiggles that were swimming across the field of raster, kind of like tiny little
This is
tadpoles.
for the viewer.
And my dad explained that we're going to step back,
Viewer.
count of three, he's going to hold my hand,
This is for you, viewer.
jump through that field of energy. So we practiced a couple times, and on the third try,
There's
we left
one.
the field of energy, and we immediately found ourselves
You can pause this for a minute and check it
in a
out.
tunnel of light, and moving forward at a very rapid rate of speed, but also in a way where you perceive that we weren't moving at all. And as my father had stated, we might get separated at the jump.
Go get in your bed. Go on, go get in your bed. Your bed. Your bed. Your bed. Get in your bed. And my cat thinks she's, I don't know what I just did here, but okay. My dog thinks she's a cat. So this is doing pretty good. Well, at least I think it's doing pretty good. It's doing really good. Let's see, start streaming. I almost ran out of time. Okay. Exit.
Each of the groups was indicated by a color. The first
Okay, there's that.
were Black American orphans, literally homeless kids. And so my dad said, "So you?" And I said, "Well, who was the next?" He said, "You were." Remember, I took you.
Are we paying
Chris
attention
Wright
yet,
jumped,
people?
Met with Dr. Agnew at the labs. I said, "Oh, so that means I was the first American."
So Donald
yes.
Trump's uncle was giving
That was sort of the beginning
Tesla's
of
papers.
kids in teleportation. That the very Manhattan Project physicists who gave us the atomic bomb, a weapon of mass destruction, I think a very negative for that reason, also gave us a very beneficial set of technologies, and those are teleportation, Tesla teleportation, and other time travel devices. And
There we go.
one of the major things they did with their intelligence findings from time travel is brief future precedents.
Ooh,
other
a lot of
destinies
information
which
that I'm sharing with you folks here.
under the aegis of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. When I was enrolled, it was ARPA.
And now
Project
you can
Pegasus,
see it
the
all
time that I joined in
clearly.
1969,
Hopefully.
was not primarily a time travel project. It was an intelligence program for the CIA.
Chris,
So
enjoy
by
your time.
1970, when the 8 methodologies that were described today had been derived, Project Pegasus existed primarily to perform remote sensing in time of past and future events to aid the U.S. government in contingency planning for future events. In addition to time travel being captured by
Alright.
the military during World War II, it is also,
T.
it's true to say that it has also been captured by the Central Intelligence Agency, which I don't think has a very high reputation.
Yeah, you want to pay close attention to this particular one.
You know, assassinating foreign leaders.
And then there's a couple
advising
more in
military to
here.
invade sovereign countries.
If you're not paying attention, you'll miss them.
You know, throwing elections.
So please pay
and also
attention.
undermining the civil liberties of
A
Americans.
person
and
can
foreign
only
nationals.
say so much
But I'm proud of
or
my
show
dad.
so
I
much
think you
without
can say
getting
he was-
themselves in trouble
He
these
was a white
days.
hat inside the intelligence.
So,
because among
with
other
that,
things, he was actively
It's a lot
urging
of
the public adoption,
policing by people who aren't policed,
declassification and deployment of Tesla teleportation.
who are afraid of information getting out to the general public that may or may not cause mass
So I have
panic.
to ask, when he had that heart attack at age 53 at his desk at Parsons,
A
was it just because of where his health was?
conglomerate of
or
anxiety
was it
attacks,
okay?
a collective,
Because my dad was someone dissident
like a church
voice.
sanctuary on a Sunday morning. It's all collective, just like the energy that's involved. People in the Senate, in the House, in the government, when they all come together and they make choices and decisions, it's a think tank. It's all collective energy.
So just one
So
door
there's
was
that.
locked. That divided the Edison labs that Hillary Clinton rescued from his first lady, turned into a national historical site, and saved over 1 million papers of Edison and his staff. As first lady, she's never credited for that, but it's a great thing for the country. And what I'm saying is that Edison's labs were
Yeah, I should have been live streaming. Should have been streaming.
Clinton saved them and made them a national
Yeah.
At the Edison Labs, my dad did something very conspicuous, which he informed me about when I was a kid on the project, which is he repeated Nikola Tesla's
Yeah,
teleportation
we've already seen
experiments
that one.
that Tesla had first begun during his famous
This one you
stay
only
in
really
Colorado
see.
Springs, Colorado, in 1895.
Yeah, a lot of these Hollywood stars now are former slaves and slaves to the old. It's kind of how they get in. Parents sell them off or get bought out. And the child gets encouraged to make the choice and decision because it's a glamorous life.
I said, well, that was probably one of the pennies that my dad talked about dropping through a magnetized cylinder, repeating one of Tesla's experiments. My dad and his lifelong or career-long supervising engineer and friend who had introduced him to his wife and so forth, they started filling in all these technical blanks for me. And my dad started talking about how at the Edison Labs, he was magnetizing cylinders like Tesla had, doing things like dropping pennies through them, dropping chalk, billiard chalks and so forth, kind of like the one that we were using for cubes, playing buffer. And here I have somebody who found one of those pennies on the streets of Montclair. So presumably sometime after 1958, and during those 8 years, certainly after 1956, my dad dropped a penny through one of those Tesla cylinders. And this young person found it on the streets of his hometown of Montclair. So that also qualified him as an American engineer who we brought up as a technical consultant on Tesla teleportation because he had recapitulated Tesla's experiments during the stay at the Edison Labs. This is another important figure in the development of time travel. This is Father Pellegrino Ernetti of the Order of St. Benedict. All of the children that I was with in Morris Plains, New Jersey, all 10 of us were going to Sunday school at the local Benedictine parish. The Benedictines, of course, are the famous Black Friars. Some of you conspiracy aficionados will remember the controversy involving the Vatican Bank, involving the hanging at Blackfriars Bridge in London, and the involvement of the Benedictines in that Vatican Bank scandal. Well, if some of them are developing time travel devices for the U.S., and he's passing their findings along, at some point they have to be paid, right? And the Vatican is, like the Queen of England, owns 25% of the land in the real estate of the world. And so, I'm getting off track, but in any case, Father Ernetti was doing some research with another Benedictine priest, a priest by the name of Agostino Gemelli. These two Vatican priests were doing research at the Catholic University of Milan in northern Italy in the 1940s. They were studying the harmonic patterns of Gregorian chants because they wanted to know why Gregorian chants have specialized properties like the ability to heal people physically, to center people spiritually, to cause people to go into trance states and so forth. And they were making a little improvement or a little change in a small microphone. And suddenly something that his partner Gemelli, I still have a picture of Father Gemelli, but something that Father Gemelli's father had said to him in childhood came through the microphone. He heard his father's voice calling him in Italian, "Oh boy, it's my little zucchini." Is zucchini the Italian word? Yeah, so that's the Italian name for that vegetable. But that was his name for his little, zucchini and a little sprite, young son. And so they're standing there, and then Ernetti said to Gemelli, "What was that?" He says, "It was my father. He was calling me his little zucchini." And so they realized they had developed essentially a window to the past. They had found a way to capture the residual sound signal of a past event. One apparently adhering some way to Father Gemelli, his aura or whatever, or in his mind, triggering maybe a memory or something like that. And they ultimately partnered with the world's leading physicist of that era, the great Enrico Fermi, who did research in Italy and also at the University of Chicago during the war. And they developed, by 1952, a flat screen, basically something like in the nature of a television screen, in which a past event was being shown. Ernetti used it to prove and to derive and show the world a missing stanza, a historically missing stanza from a Roman play. And he also insisted until his death in 1994, as a very respected Catholic prelate, that they had also captured images of the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. I think Fermi is probably the central figure in the hidden history of time travel because he partnered with Ernetti and Gemelli on the improvement and development of the chronovisor, this holographic looking glass technology to see and then ultimately send people to past or future. And he was the mentor of Harold Agnew, the federal science director, and sort of the overseer of teleportation stuff centered in New Mexico when we were on Project Pegasus. So Fermi apparently has this covert connection to both the derivation, teleportation.
Yeah, pause this if you need to, whenever you need
Whether
to,
chronovised
and
event or experience
read for yourself what it's got to say
he
there.
doesn't go back and put you where you're
And
examining
again,
what
there's a
happened
lot of
when the kid shot
information,
the gun.
a lot of
It takes you
truth,
back in time to
a
the
lot
kid
of
shooting the gun.
facts.
So the past has to exist. We have to live in a time-space continuum for the chronovisor approach that I was on to even have been possible. And Fermi definitely believed that the past still exists. So somewhere in the complex formula behind him on the chalkboard is ultimately a formula that squares the circle and completes the fact that the past, present, future exist simultaneously, and you can visit both simply by going.
Okay, so there's a lot there. That's just parts of a 6-hour speech that he gave back in 2013. But a couple things that stood out to me watching that lecture is that he had stated children handled the stress of the jump better than adults, and that was the reason that they were being tested. That they used this technology developed from Tesla's own schematics to bend the space-time continuum. It basically goes like this. Now, Einstein, in his theory of relativity, he added a fourth dimension. It been out, left, right, up, down. But he stated that without the fourth dimension of time, it was incomplete. Basically saying this, I can tell you to meet me at the station and give you an address, but unless I give you a time, that information is useless. Like, meet me when? Thus was created the space-time continuum. And as the theory goes, by bending it, essentially folding it like a piece of paper, you could create shortcuts to different eras of time. This is what's referred to as a traversable wormhole, or an Einstein-Rosen bridge. Vishaga states that this was achieved by accessing radiant energy using a device made up of 2 boobs 8 feet tall and 10 feet apart. He states that his father had been working in Edison Labs when he recreated one of the Tesla devices and dropped a penny through to the past. A lab, which as he puts it, was saved by Hillary Clinton. Now, why was she so concerned with this lab? Were they procuring some of this information? Now, this leads me to the they never thought she'd lose. Listen to what ex-Navy SEAL Bill Wood claims to have worked with this looking glass device had to say.
One of the last predictions put out by the LQ was that, for all intents and purposes, and this is just my level of understanding, is that Hillary Clinton would be president in 2012. When the Yellow Cube is involved, it leads me to question what I know about looking glass and string theory along with it. The first question that anybody that knew anything about the process would know is who was using the cube when it made that prediction. If I knew that, then I could tell you why it would predict what it predicted.
So he's saying that they had seen Hillary winning. Now, he states 2012. Something a lot of these different accounts I've been going through have really alluded to is that the future is sort of in motion, and with time not being linear and dates being hard to pinpoint. So I think it's entirely possible that Hillary knew she was going to win the 2016 election. And I would even put this post up as proof. Happy birthday to this future president. I don't care how confident you are about winning. No one posts that, especially not on something of this magnitude, literally an election to run the world. I mean, that's like punching karma in the face and not giving a speech that night. She was too certain of victory, okay? Let's be honest. Something was weird there. Now, all this aside, the one problem I run into with a lot of these accounts is that they all get a little weird at times. Like, for example, Al Bielek, who has a compelling story of being part of the Philadelphia experiment, and he had thrust first to 2137, and then he was sent to 2749. And watching him, he really does seem to be speaking from memory. And truly, I believe that he believes what he's saying, and I'm not saying that it's wrong. But there's certain things, like at one point he mentions wondering about NASA while in the future, which would have been impossible because the Philadelphia experiment allegedly happened in 43, and NASA hadn't even existed yet. Now, he also, at one point, speaks about working on the Montauk Project, which was 1984, so he possibly could have been getting those years mixed up. And I also think it's possible that these experiments could be leaving wear and tear on their minds. You're talking about experimenting with the human psyche, so I think this could be maybe muddying their memories as well. But now the Montauk Project was exactly that. Now this was also a project that was using tech found in one of these downed spacecraft from the 40s, which was a chair. And when they sat in this chair, they found it amplified their consciousness, basically letting them project it out of their body. Now going back to Burris, he had talked about the government being handed some of this tech by a race of beings from Orion. You have Mishago, who talks about DARPA having to use psychic projection also with the Montauk chair to observe the building which John McCain was being held captive in. So while I think it's good to have an open mind with these things, I think it's also good to have a healthy skepticism sometimes. But all wild stories aside, and again, something that does seem consistent with these accounts, they all seem to be talking about real devices. And just look at the Q drops alone. There have been a huge amount of instances where future-proof past. I mean, 1 year to the day it said future-proof past watch the wives. Sure enough, here's Bush Senior's funeral with all the wives of the most prominent political figures of the last 40 years getting cards followed by looks of horror. Now they could have set that up.
This is funny.
What were the odds that there would
That's
be
funny
an event
stuff.
with all those people in the same place on that very day with cameras in front of them, where this could even be set up? Or right before 8chan was taken down, Q posted 93 DK. And then by the time Akun, after a lot of problems getting started, finally was brought back up, allowing Q to make his first post back exactly 93 days later, 93 dark. And those are just
Good
two of
grief.
dozens. I mean, it's almost unreal at this point. 11/11/18, America will be unified again. Now, we all thought it was going to be a Veterans Day parade until Q posted that. Timelines change. But now, if you look at it again, you'll notice that there's a dot after the 18. A year later, once Akun is up and running and everyone is united again, people find that it's being run through the DoD server with the address 11/11/18. I mean, they almost have to have one of these devices. And again, President Trump's uncle is the person who went through Nikola Tesla's life work. He was an electrical engineer and a physicist. So this is one of the rare people on this planet who could actually understand what he was reading. And here you have Andrew Mishago stating that these looking glasses and time devices were mostly derived from Nikola Tesla's own schematics. Is this what Q means when he repeatedly tells us you have more than you know? And X out POTUS is always 5 steps ahead. Is it because they now have access to Alice's floor in Area 51 and that they have their own looking glass and their own booms to create time dilation energy fields? I mean, there is a book from the late 1800s called Little Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey that starts off by claiming it's based on a real person who's guided by the masters of all masters, a man named Don, well, a man with the title of Don, but the kid even looks like Baron Trump. And let's think about this. Donald Trump has been in the limelight for 40 years.
Yep, 40 plus years.
Mentioned that there's a book about a guy named Trump. I mean, he's the exact kind of person who would totally eat something like that up. And he's had a son, Barron, for 13 years now, and still, for over a decade, no one's ever found this. I mean, think about it. If there was a book out there with your exact name and the title, you would definitely know about that. And nothing until 2017, when the real Baron Trump was just around the age of the character in the book.
Oh, that's good.
So was this book just found because it was just written? And what even gets more eerie is Lockwood's third novel. That's right, the first two are about Baron Trump. The Last President, which begins with a scene from a panicked New York City in early November describing a state of uproar after the election of an enormously opposed outsider candidate. Remember the marches down Times Square? It goes on that mobs of vast size are organizing under the lead of anarchists and socialists. It says that the Fifth Avenue Hotel will be the first to feel the fury of the mob, and that's exactly where the Trump Tower is.
Protesters gathered in Philadelphia, Seattle, Boston, Portland, Oakland, California, Chicago, and New York tonight. Protest in New York has made its way to Trump Tower, where a large crowd is gathered.
Here, let's look at the most popular review on Amazon. It states that in the book, Congress dissolves the presidency because he meddled in their greed and fights against their business dealings with the money changers, that he's a good guy with a direct approach against corruption and racism, and is loved by the people, although he wasn't popular at first. And then it states that it becomes vague at the end. Is that because the end is yet to happen? And again, this is just some what-if video, just a chance for us to suspend disbelief and actually consider the possibility of the existence of these devices and the increasingly plausible idea that they're being used right now by opposing factions. One who has ruled over us for centuries, if not millennia, and the other who is trying to bring us on board. And next, I want to take a closer look at the two more fantastic parts of Burrish and Bashago's accounts. Then I'll give my own thoughts on time travel and the possible effects of time travel. Here's Bashago talking about being able to separate the conscience from the body.
Another thing we were doing was we were being physically spun. If you put somebody on a tabletop-like device in a sort of classic Da Vinci Vitruvian man kind of body position, but with their head at the center of the circle, and to have them look up at a spiral arch on the ceiling while they're being spun clockwise 33 rotations per minute, you can train them to literally go out of body. That's what they were doing. And when we were out of body, we would then go to the astral realms and then we'd come back into our body.
Excuse me.
By one of the ladies from DARPA.
Now, there's a lot of symbolism in this clip I found. Like the spiral here, which we know is a pedo symbol. This mention of 33. Is this his way of letting them know that he's one of them? Or is this the origin of the symbols? Is this why the 33 is so widely used? Is this why they use the swirl? They said they use mostly children, Central and South American children. Could this be also part of why the wall means more than we know? But going back to what he said about being able to separate the conscience from the body, this goes along with something Donald Marshall had claimed when he was talking about the cloning centers in Canada. That they were full-grown human clones and then using a device to separate the conscience and then transferring it to the newly grown body. And he claims they've been able to clone people since right after World War II, which I find quite interesting that almost everything seems to go back to the late 40s and 50s. It is theorized that the Montauk chair was achieving these astral projections by accessing the subject's pineal gland. Now, fluoride is said to calcify the pineal gland. When did they start putting fluoride in the water? You guessed it, the late 40s. But now let's go on to Burrish's claims of beings coming from Orion and giving us some of these technologies, even having treaties with many of the world's powers. That claim might not be as wild as it sounds. There are actually many ancient cultures who claim to have been visited by beings who came from the stars. Like the Dogon tribe from West Africa claimed that beings from the star Sirius had visited them long ago. This tribe even had knowledge of Saturn's rings and Jupiter's moons and things they could have never known about. I mean, there's a 4,500-year-old Sumerian carving that depicts the sun with 8 planets around it, the same size as ours, with one that even has a ring. I mean, this is thousands of years before we knew we orbited the sun. The Mayans claimed their gods had come down from the Pleiades star constellation, which is in line with Orion's belt, and in line with it on the other side is Sirius, which, along with the Dogon tribe, the ancient Egyptians believed their gods had come from. You have Osiris, who comes from Orion. You have Isis, who comes from Sirius. Ancient Hindu literature speaks of air battles between flying craft they called Vimana. I mean, where did they get this technology? And that's not all. The Vedic text, amongst other writings from ancient India, are a wealth of knowledge. Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, and Erwin Schrödinger regularly read the Vedic text. Heisenberg even stated, that quantum theory will not look as ridiculous to people who have read the Vedanta. The Vedanta is the conclusion of Vedic thought. And Schrodinger was quoted as saying that the unity and continuity of the Vedanta are reflected in the unity and continuity of wave mechanics. This is entirely consistent with the Vedanta concept of all in one. How did they acquire all this knowledge thousands of years before the modern world? I mean, Hitler even famously sent expeditions to India in the 30s to seek out their propulsion formulas, including this ancient anti-gravity formula. And again, isn't it interesting how all these things started coming out after World War II? Rockets, teleportation, time devices, cloning, and all after bringing the Nazi scientists over here with Project Paperclip. What did they find in India? And wouldn't you know it, Prajapati, known in Hindu lore as the great creator deity of the Vedic period of ancient India, is represented by the constellation Orion. Another interesting connection with Orion is that the pyramids at Teotihuacan in Mexico, which are 2,000 years old, align perfectly with Orion's belt, and are named the Temple of the Sun, the Temple of the Moon, and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, again with the occult references, like Osiris and Isis earlier. And furthermore, the pyramids at Giza also line up perfectly with Orion's belt. Not only that, but the Great Pyramid just so happens to be built on the latitude line 29.9792458, aka the speed of light. The speed of light, as I will go over in a minute, being one of the most crucial components to time travel. Bringing me to the next part of this video. Is time travel plausible? The first piece of evidence I'll present is an easy one that involves an electron. Now, when an electron gets excited, it will emit a specific amount of quantum energy, which in turn will jump the electron from one fixed orbit to another, without ever occupying the space in between. Now, this is known as a quantum leap. So theoretically, one could argue that wormholes do potentially exist at the subatomic level. This electron moved from point A to point C without touching point B. But what about on our scale? Einstein's theory of special relativity states that the closer someone's speed gets to the speed of light, the slower time moves around him. Now, this concept is called time dilation. It has been repeatedly proven by comparing atomic clocks aboard GPS satellites, timepieces aboard the International Space Station, and amongst many other methods. So technically, time travel into the future is actually possible and proven. Now, in this theory is also the famous energy equals mass times the speed of light in a vacuum. Now, the speed of light is measured in a vacuum because only in a vacuum do all wavelengths of light travel at the same speed. Now, normally the spectrum spans from blue, the slower side, to red, the faster side. But I think this is an important distinction because at one point, Andrew Basiago described the light field as being blue and white. Now, didn't QX the significance of the colors blue and white? Is this why they use them? But ultimately, according to the theory of special relativity, if you were to somehow travel close to the speed of light for an extended period of time, you could say travel a year, then come back to Earth, and 500 years would have passed, essentially traveling to the future. And the faster light waves are red. The faster you go, the further you go into the future. Does that mean that blue energy field with slower particles would send you into the past? Or is that just what everything looks like around you since you're moving so fast? Or is there even another possible way? Because going into the future is one thing. But even if you did, how could you get back? Isn't the past the past? If you're going according to the space-time continuum, space and time are relative. So shouldn't we be able to theoretically traverse about them all equally? Think about it like this. Left of me and right of me currently are existing simultaneously. Up and down exist simultaneously. In and out exist simultaneously. Does that mean the past, present, and future all also exist simultaneously? And if you are able to travel at high speeds, propelling yourself into the future, shouldn't you be able to also go back into the past? Well, this brings us to string theory. Now, string theory is loved by some
Almost done.
and
Almost
hated by
done.
others. Very polarizing. Let's start off by explaining the simplest of terms. In an atom, you have particles called electrons, which we just went over. They orbit the nucleus. The nucleus is made up of protons and neutrons. Protons and neutrons are made up of particles called quarks. And string theory takes this one step further, postulating that at the very core of every particle is a strand of vibrating energy. Now, string theory at its core is an attempt to solve the main conflict between Einstein's theory of relativity and quantum mechanics. The problem is that the graviton doesn't work with the other three forces. Altogether, you have four forces, which are strong, weak, electromagnetic, and gravity. Each force is carried by a boson. Strong forces are carried by bosons named gluons. And as you guessed it, they're used to glue the quarks together and glue the protons and neutrons together.
But it's not just a clever name.
Electromagnetic
No,
forces are
not
carried
just
by
a clever
protons.
name.
Weak forces are carried by W and Z. And gravity is carried by the graviton, which is by far the weakest of all forces. So string theory is an attempt to unify gravity with the other three forces. Now, one of the things they ran into when they were working this theory out was the creation of a new theoretical particle called the tachyon, which traveled faster than the speed of light, and on paper anyway, back in time. Now, this is obviously what is used to discredit string theory, but is it possible that the math isn't wrong after all? And maybe, could this be what they're really testing at CERN? I mean, that's an awful lot of money to look at some boson. Is CERN an attempt to open some sort of looking glass technology on a grand scale? We already know they're into the occult and possibly trying to summon entities or whatever this clip is. Could they be tapping into ways of traveling not just through time but into other dimensions? And if you take string theory further, you get superstring theory, which part of it states that at each nexus of space-time there are another 6 dimensions, which at its onset seems like an odd claim. I mean, wouldn't we be able to interpret these other dimensions? But not necessarily. Now, when you consider the way sight works, we're not actually seeing things. Rather, we're seeing the light reflecting off said object. Now consider this. The human eye is so incredibly limited.
This is where
in
it gets
range,
good.
we can only see less than 1%, a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now back to string theory, if you work it out to its final inception, you get M theory, where altogether you have 11 dimensions. Could these extra 7 dimensions account for planes of reality coexisting with our own that we can't even see? I mean, is this how these summonses that John Dee and Queen Elizabeth I tapped into work?
Let me ask you about something called Stargates. You've seen the movies. If you haven't, check them out. Stargates. When they transport a person from one space to another, they use these rings. The rings come from either above or below, whichever, but they surround the individual, and a beam of some kind of light encompasses the inside of these rings, and as the light gets brighter, rings automatically all of a sudden together go up, and it's gone along with the light. The light does not remain, it goes with the rings. So teleportation that way.
Right, so they say they had found specific sequences of sound in this ancient literature that was stored in the Vatican. The Vatican, by the way, which has miles of ancient literature in its vaults that no one's allowed to see. I mean, sometimes I wonder if this was the real reason that the library at Alexandria was burned down, to hide this ancient knowledge from the masses. But there seems to be something to sound frequency and melody. Maybe this is why the American Standards Association changed the standard A from 432 hertz to 440 hertz in 1926. Bashago had said that Fermi was experimenting with the frequencies when he made his breakthrough. Burrish talks to them doing the slight changes in frequency to get different results with this equipment. Could they have changed the standard frequency to 440 to keep us away from ones that we could possibly use? Much like adding the fluoride in the water to calcify the pineal gland, many believe that the original norm, 432, is a frequency more in tune with nature. And that 440 causes more anxiousness. And if we are all vibrating strands of energy at the subatomic level of every atom, could all reality, including ourselves, be susceptible to certain frequencies and melodies, if you will. One potential argument for this is the solfeggio scale, which many claim to be healing frequencies. And of course, a lot of that's subjective, and it's really impossible to test. But we do know of observable changes that have been documented in plants. Here's a study that states that when they applied certain frequencies to these plants, they could significantly promote the division of cell wall fluidity of callus cells, and also significantly enhance the activity of protective enzymes and endogenous hormones. It goes on to talk about all the different ways they were able to change these things and what results they got from which vegetables with different frequencies. So, the idea that we at the most subatomic level are made up of energy isn't really that far-fetched. Different results with this equipment. Could they have changed the standard frequency to 440 to keep us away from ones that we could possibly use? Much like adding the fluoride in the water to calcify the pineal gland, many believe that the original norm, 432, is a frequency more in tune with nature, and that 440 causes more anxiousness. And if we are all vibrating strands of energy at this subatomic level of every atom, could all reality, including ourselves, be susceptible to certain frequencies and melodies, if you will? One potential argument for this is the solfeggio scale, which many claim to be healing frequencies. And of course, a lot of that's subjective, and it's really impossible to test. But we do know of observable changes that have been documented in plants. Here's a study that states that when they applied certain frequencies to these plants, they could significantly promote the division of cell wall fluidity of callus cells, and also significantly enhance the activity of protective enzymes and endogenous hormones. It goes on to talk about all the different ways they were able to change these things and what results they got from which vegetables with different frequencies. So, the idea that we at the most subatomic level are made up of energy isn't really that far-fetched. And take that one step further. The idea of projecting our conscience out of our mind isn't that far-fetched either. Our brain is the most intense supercomputer in known creation. It's not even close. All of our thoughts are waves of energy. Our brain has 5 different frequencies of brain waves running from high to low. It transmits
Power
waves
of
of
thought
energy
is the strongest force
It's
in
a
the
transmitter
known
and a
universe.
receiver of energy. Now consider how the Bluetooth in your phone works. Your phone, which isn't a millionth as powerful as your brain, it transmits low frequency waves of energy to your stereo, which is a receiver. It's essentially the same technology. Only ours is far advanced. I mean, if a phone can do it, surely our brain can. And if phones are set to Bluetooth, they're also capable of reading low frequency waves. Now, who's saying it's only picking up the ones that are being sent out by our electronics? It's just something to think about. But if a phone can send out complex information without it getting jumbled using the exact thing that we use for every thought in our brain all day long, then who's saying we can't send our consciousness out without being jumbled? I mean, with the help of a medium, of course. But now I'm starting to get a little off track. So what does all this mean? I think the discovery of how to harness electricity changed everything.
This right here is big. This is huge. Okay. Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, Einstein, all these places, all these things. Oh, I need all that. Falling out, late bloomer. If Edison had a needle to find in a haystack, he would proceed at once until he found the object of his search. I was a sorry witness to such doings, knowing that no theory and calculation would have saved him 90% of his labor. Electric charge periodically reverses direction and is transmitted to customers by a transformer that could handle much higher voltages. Alternating current runs through appliances, car motors. All this Tesla's ideas are splendid, but they are utterly impractical. Okay, so there's all that. Then we come back over here.
Edison gets most of the credit, obviously, due to his DC current, but it was really Tesla's discovery of AC current, what we use today, which changed the world. I mean, everything is energy. Once they knew how to harness it, I believe that opened up the potential to unlock everything in this world. And it seems that in the decades following, different physicists began to figure out how to manipulate it, whether it be from reverse engineering devices they found, procuring ancient writings, or simply working out the formulas from scratch. In the case of the man who discovered AC current and opened the floodgates himself, Nikola Tesla, the man who was obsessed with manipulating energy, was even working at transmitting energy for free through the air when he died. It seems that from these newly discovered breakthroughs came three types of devices: the Montauk chair, a teleporter, and a looking glass. Now, the looking glass appears to be showing them probable future timelines and/or events. I think Q Team is telling us and telling the Black Hats that they have one. I mean, it's mentioned right here in post 9, single digits. And Q's been telling us constantly that we have more than we know. Reread the drops, expand your thinking. And I'll admit, I would read sometimes like, how much more can there be? I mean, I feel like we've been over these pretty thoroughly, but maybe it's been right in front of us the whole time. I mean, with the constant future proofs, past, timelines, change, boom, boom. I mean, they said these machines work in tandem, right? That would mean 4 booms. The constant Alice in Wonderland references. Who did he say was Alice? Hillary. Who saved Edison's lab when they had time breakthroughs with Tesla's technology? Hillary. Who did the looking glass tell our intel agencies would be our future president? Hillary. Who was oddly confident the entire election. So confident that she didn't even have that many rallies or a concession speech written. Hillary. Who were the papers and websites so sure we're going to win, despite huge crowds for Trump every single night by 99%? Hillary. They never thought she would lose. They had no contingency plan.
At least I will go down as a president.
All this is why, to me, this is one of the most exciting posts that Q has ever dropped. And what did Q Plus post 1 hour and 7 minutes before this drop? Reverse engineer. And there are those numbers again. 1 and 7 that keep popping up. And what happened 1 hour and 7 minutes after Trump posted reverse engineer? Q posted about Project Looking Glass, which was a device reverse engineered from the cylinder seals and a yellow cube. And who did the elite worship? Amongst others, the black cube from the cult of Saturn. Saturn is the god of time. Now, who was said to have a looking glass? DARPA. Who made Facebook, originally known as Project LifeLog, as a way to gather data on nearly every citizen worldwide? DARPA. Could this info have been being collected to strengthen the accuracy of one of these devices? Or what about just the other day when someone found a 4 terabyte trove of sensitive data belonging to over 1 billion people, a seventh of the world's population, found on an unsecured Google Cloud server? How valuable would that information be to someone with one of these devices? Or everything else being used? I mean, the possibility of being able to move about time changes everything. And really, on the simplest of levels, the concept of stretching time is actually quite common. I mean, all the time there'd be days where it seems like you blink and 5 minutes go by. And then there's days where every minute seems like an hour. I mean, sometimes we'll fall asleep and have a full dream that seems to go on. And when you wake up, only 10 minutes has passed. It's possible that we don't fully understand time as much as we think we do. And I think it's important to remember that up until 150 years ago, we didn't understand any of this. In the grand scheme of time, this is brand new. And look at the Mandela effect. This is something that I've never been able to make sense of until maybe now. I mean, if they were in fact moving about the timeline to past events, it would undoubtedly be altering things, albeit slightly. But still, how do you explain these books from the late 1800s, which Wikipedia describes as being inspired by Alice in Wonderland? That's right. The Baron Trump books are inspired by Alice in Wonderland. You have Alice in Wonderland was inspired by Alice Little. Now here's a clip of
Funny
Trump
part about it is
posted Project Looking Glass where he says,
the Baron Trump book came before Alice in Wonderland. So how is that possible?
three things. First, he says little Adam Schiff, and then emphasizes the number 9. Says it twice. Then pauses. Post number 9 mentions a looking glass, and then right after that, he says, "Boom! This tech seems to work with boobs." And if you take this one step further, what follows the White Rabbit? His pocket watch. Here's a pocket watch from 1944, the year after Trump's uncle went over Tesla's papers. That's called the Ingersoll Trump. Ingersoll just so happens to be the name of the author who wrote the Baron Trump novels, which are, quote, a response to Alice in Wonderland. And then The Last President, which almost identically parallels Trump's current presidency. You have unexplainable video like this old Charlie Chaplin clip from the 20s when his lady looks like she's talking on his cell phone.
Right there.
You have this video from the 30s where this factory worker looks like she's talking on the cell phone. You have this ancient Greek carving that looks like a laptop with USB ports. You have ancient Egyptian carvings that look like helicopters and UFOs. You have 1,000 future proofs past. That's some that go the exact minute. I mean, if Q is in fact telling us that they're in possession of at least a looking glass device validating this technology, then that to me is one of the most exciting revelations of all time. And it's been 80 years since Roswell. I mean, it would almost be unbelievable if we hadn't reverse engineered some of this tech by now. And I also believe for that reason that a good go the exact minute. I mean, if Q is in fact telling us that they're in possession of at least a looking glass device validating this technology, then that to me is one of the most exciting revelations of all time. And it's been 80 years since Roswell. I mean, it would almost be unbelievable if we hadn't reverse engineered some of this tech by now. And I also believe for that reason that a good 90% of modern UFO sightings are crafts that were created right here on planet Earth.
Amen.
Just in World War II, pilots were reporting flying objects that they called Foo Fighters. Here, let's look them up. Can't do that. Let's look up the goddess Isis. Can't do that. Hey, let's look up Ahsoka, the Hindu emperor who commissioned the books which contained the info on how to build a Vimana, which the Nazis went there in the first place. Can't do that. This is how they bury information. They used to do it by slowly changing the history books. Now they also use the internet. Want to know about Rick Ross, who was working with the CIA in the 80s to help spread cocaine?
I'm Rick Ross.
Sorry. Here's a rapper for you. What about one of the pioneers of this technology, Tesla? You can now pick from one of our many models. Sure, we know some of these things still, but what will they look like in 100 years? Some we barely know now. The first Foo Fighters sightings occurred in November of 1944, when pilots flying over Western Europe by 1946, fast-moving, ground-blowing objects following their aircraft. The objects were variously described as fiery and glowing red, white, and orange. Some pilots described them as resembling Christmas tree lights and reported that they seemed to toy with the aircraft, making wild turns before simply vanishing. And these are real confirmed sightings from the end of World War II. When you look up Foo Fighters, you get a band. But when you mention UFOs, you're laughed and scoffed at. I mean, Christopher Columbus literally wrote about observing a light glimmering at a distance that vanished and reappeared several times during the night, moving up and down in sudden and passing gleams. Then hours later, when they reached land, the inhabitants eagerly came to him and asked if they were the people from the heavens. Had they just seen these same lights? And these sightings had occurred at the same time Christopher Columbus was sailing over the Bermuda Triangle, documented in his journal. But what about April 14th, 1561, where there's literal documentation of the people of Nuremberg describing an aerial battle, followed by the appearance of a large black triangular object, and then a large crash outside the city. The newspaper, which still exists to this day, claims that witnesses observed hundreds of spears, cylinders, and other odd-shaped objects that moved erratically overhead. The newspaper describes the objects of various shapes, including crosses, globes, two lunar crescents, a black sphere, and tubular objects from where several smaller round objects emerged and darted out around the sky at dawn. In an official newspaper from 1561 Germany. And then 5 years later in Switzerland, it happened again. Since technology exists, and it has existed for a long, long time. And this is the next horizon for us. You had the Industrial Revolution, then you had the Scientific Revolution, then the Digital Revolution, and now the Space-Time Revolution. My overall decode is that I believe Alice in Wonderland is code for someone using this equipment. With Alice going down the rabbit hole being an Industrial Revolution, then you had the Scientific Revolution, then the Digital Revolution, and now the Space-Time Revolution. My overall decode is that I believe Alice in Wonderland is code for someone using this equipment. With Alice going down the rabbit hole being an allegory to the using of an overall decode is that I believe Alice in Wonderland is code for someone using this equipment with Alice long time. And this is the next claims that witnesses observed hundreds of spheres, cylinders, and other odd-shaped objects that moved erratically overhead. The newspaper describes the objects of various shapes, including crosses, globes,
just in case anybody else didn't catch that, because I'm kind of sporadic, so I have to stop and look.
Smaller round objects
So
and
you can stop and look with me.
In an official newspaper from 1561 Germany. And then 5 years later in Switzerland, it happened again. Since technology exists, and it has existed for a long, long time. And this is the next horizon for us. You had the Industrial Revolution, then you had the Scientific Revolution, then the Digital Revolution, and now the Space-Time
Fourth
Revolution.
dimension.
My overall decode is that I believe Alice in Wonderland is code for some.
Okay, why is this relevant? Game theory. Outside a potential operator who has been dialed in with orders specific to his or her mission. Nobody else has this information. Operators never divulge. Alice in Wonderland.
Someone using this equipment, with Alice going down the rabbit hole being an allegory to the using of an Einstein-Rosen-Bridge traverse time. I think these two posts tell me that the QT has one and are using it. I believe that they're also telling us that Hillary was using one in Saudi Arabia, that access to these devices are being shut down. Even CERN was curiously shut down December 2018 with a reopening date of early 2021, right after the election of what undoubtedly they hope is a new president. What do we know about the military in general? They're always 50 years ahead of public disclosure. To be honest, that's probably a safe estimate. I think it's possible that aside from access to a looking glass, they also have access to this entire floor, allowing them to physically move about probable futures and past events as well as view them. I think it's possible that some of the president's early trips around the world, like for example this Saudi Arabia trip that these trips started around, were about commandeering the different components to these devices. I also believe it's possible that this sort of tech has been in the possession of the Trump family for many years, stemming from the president's Uncle John, and now are getting to combine it with years of reverse engineered advances achieved by our government, working with similar recovered and gifted ET tech. That's what I'm coming away with after looking into this. Now will all this ever fully be disclosed? Who knows? I doubt it. So, there's no way to ever know this for 100% certain. That's why I said at the beginning of the video that this was a chance to suspend disbelief, just let our minds wander. What if?
Iron Eagle,
But
huh?
I'll leave you with this. What did you say when asked, are we alone? No. Consider the vastness of space. This is something that really resonated with me when he said that. This is something I have felt my entire life. How anyone can look up at the endless array of stars and think that we're the only ones in the universe with sentient beings inhabited it is beyond me. 1995, astronomer Bob Williams puts together a team and aims the Hubble telescope at an empty patch of space by the Big Dipper's handle for 100 straight hours. What they discovered was staggering. The Hubble telescope didn't just capture stars in this blank area of space, it captured full galaxies, thousands of them, in one tiny, seemingly blank area of space. I believe personally that there are many civilizations among the stars. Thanks to one of them, we now own a looking glass. Where we go one, we go all.
Thank you guys for putting
Our
up.
nation of pioneers still yearns to conquer the unknown. Because we are Americans and the future belongs totally to us. Once more, we will launch intrepid souls blazing through the sky and soaring into the heavens. Once more, we will summon the American spirit to tame the next great American frontier. When it comes to space, too often, for too many years, our dreams of exploration and discovery were really squandered by politics and bureaucracy, and we knocked that out. It will be even more incredible, far more incredible, because we are giving you a platform the likes of which nobody has ever been given before. Together, there is absolutely nothing Americans can't do. When we get together, there's nobody even close. Now we are ready to begin the next great chapter of American space exploration.
Thank you guys for watching this with me. I appreciate it. What's happening now basically is moving that over there, come over here and do that. And I didn't have anybody come to the studio with me, so in the meantime, let's go ahead and do this. And then we'll try that. How about this? Yeah, there's no point in that. Let's try that. There we go. And so, a lot of stuff going on these days. A lot of fun stuff. I'll see you another time. It's close to 2 in the morning where I'm at. I'm past my bedtime. I'm probably keeping other people awake too. Not meaning to, but you know, hey. Opportunity arose that I had to do the live stream, so here we are. Try to get a couple people to join me, but that's okay. So I'll leave you with a riddle. One bright day in the middle of the night, 2 dead boys got up and had a great fight. Back to back, they faced each other, drew their swords, and shot each other. 2 deaf policemen heard the noise, came and shot them 2 dead boys. And then, if you don't believe my story is true, well, ask the blind man. He saw it too. Good night.